I'd like to introduce our panelists, then I'm going to do a short presentation of precisely 5 minutes. Hosseini, coming to join us from Havas, Vivin Zhu from Axiom, and Larry Allen, who kindly stepped in, coming from Turner today. So this afternoon's presentation, very briefly, it's about business models for data partnerships. So these types of models are very different from the data models we saw on Tuesday night. So just a little bit of background. Winterberry Group's a management consultancy. We work in and around the advertising marketing services landscape. We work for the data companies, the Axioms, Experians, Epsilons, etc. We work for the brands, companies like Time Warner and Turner, Citi, Axiom, L'Oreal, folks like that. And we work for publishers, Meredith, Time, etc. So we kind of bring a lens of looking at it for not just how the models work between the different types of partners, but we also look at it through the lens of finance, because we're a subsidiary of an investment bank, Petsky Prunier, and we work for private equity firms who invest in the sector as well. So the data landscape over the last several years has gotten increasingly complex. I saw a Brinker Marketech landscape today that just came out on campaign management and marketing automation. The number of companies were up 156% year over year. And I looked back at his 2011 chart, and there were about 40 or 50 companies, and he now has something like 3,000 companies. So in a market that gets complex both from the data side and from the technology side, what's possible has increased. So we started to look, we said, all right, there are kind of 4 primary data models that we see in the market today: compilers and co-ops, as well as second-party data exchanges, and now emerging are the onboarding and anonymous match partnering. And each of the models has a bit of a nuance to it. Cooperatives were probably the first ones that got started in data partnering. Companies like Abacus, companies like iBehavior, which is now part of WPP, Datalogix, which was acquired by Oracle. Almost all of these co-ops, which have thousands of contributors, typically retail, e-commerce, B2B and B2C, would go and they put in their data, they would share the data, but it wouldn't be transparent. So they couldn't see other parties' data. They could model on top of it, or they could have the co-op manager build those models. So that, 1992 kind of to the present. Compilers, I started a data firm back in '98, and we were compiling. We were using 3 sources. Some of the large compilers up to 150, 200 different sources, but sometimes transparent, sometimes not transparent. It's the most prevalent model. It started in the offline world. It's continued into the online world, where you start to see intent data being compiled, location data being compiled. So there are all sorts of varieties. It could be public, it could be private, but it's a set established model. What we've started to see come out in the last couple of years are a few new models. Second-party data exchanges, so we saw the Blue Sky Exchange, there's an Adobe Data Exchange. So the data exchange model, where companies will put their segments up, or segments will get aggregated, anonymized, used for digital advertising. So that probably 5 years old now, 6 years old. And has become a fairly well-established model as well. But then there are new models, which are second-party exchanges where companies get together and they say, all right, I want to look at your data, you can look at my data, sometimes transparent, and they can see each other's data, but more often than not, non-transparent. Sometimes it's direct, other times it goes through safe haven type environments. And then probably the most recent that really started about 4 years ago, onboarding and anonymous match partners. The onboarders, there are probably 5 primary onboarders in the US. It's starting to come over into Europe. It really has not hit into the Far East yet, into APAC or into LATAM. LiveRamp is probably the best known of those and the most used, but they all share data back and forth with each other, so they're co-opetition. When you look inside of this onboarding model, what you see is proprietary match data, reference sets. You have publishers contributing, you have cross-device contributions, you have app data, you have data that's coming from walled gardens. It's anonymized, and then it's pushed out for activation. What that actually looks like, as a brand, you start with your CRM data. You may go direct to an onboarder, or you may go through a database service provider through that safe haven type environment. Sometimes you'll go through a DMP, but not always through a DMP, and then into the marketing activation stacks. But you have publishers, brands, data compilers, co-ops, all involved into this process. So it's become probably the most complex and integrated of the process, and definitely an emerging category. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to come over, I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through a set of questions that they've been briefed on, but I haven't decided if I'll let them speak yet. Oh, one other slide I want to throw up here just before my time is up. One of the things that we're looking at right now is how big is this market? So we've done some preliminary market sizing of the data industry. As far as we know, we're the only ones who've done it. We're coming out that this market has gone from about a $10 billion market to almost a $15 billion market in the US. And if you look how direct mail centric it was and how that has shrunk, while all of the digital categories, including TV, have started to expand. Later this year, we're going to do a big study with the IAB Data Center of Excellence and the the Data and Marketing Association in the US for a more definitive market sizing, because that's one of the questions. How much out of the $350 billion of advertising, what's really spent on this whole data ecosystem that we live in?